What a weekend it was. A wild weekend in the first ever Super Wildcard Weekend. 6 games in all over the weekend, 3 on Saturday, 3 on Sunday. Some really good games, some not so good games, and some really bad blood games that spilled over into the postseason that now I think have started some real tangible rivalries. And the action was so good over the weekend, it spilled over into Monday. Got a national championship game and a new national champion crowned in the Alabama Crimson Tide. And Doug Peterson and the Philadelphia Eagles agreed to part ways. Herb is having to make a decision in Jacksonville, and all kinds of things have transpired. So I think it's a great time to talk about all of these things and more here on the LouieTeeNetwork podcast. Who else could it be? Me, your man, Louie T. Welcome to the 129th installment of the LouieTeeNetwork podcast. I, of course, am your set man, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. A lot to get to on today's show. As I mentioned, a lot to recap from Wildcard Weekend, and we'll start to set the table for the divisional round weekend. 4 games, 2 on Saturday, 2 on Sunday. Should be exceptional football. Bart Scott, can't wait. We'll talk about how we got to divisional football, however, as we'll wrap up Wildcard Weekend, put a bow on that, and then move on to the divisional round. I want to also talk about all of the different moves. I told you we were going to follow all of these coaching and GM moves in the NFL very closely. Some assistant coaches have been fired and hired. So we'll talk about all of those transactions a little bit later on the show as we wrap things up with garbage time. And, of course, national championship done in the books. Alabama Crimson Tide, your new college football champions. And I'm going to be honest with you, never thought we would get to this point with college football. Of all the sports that made it to the finish line, that was the one where I really questioned if it was even really necessary to make it to the finish line. I mean, it was just weird looking down at the bottom and seeing Alabama 12-0 and Ohio State 7-0. Like, what? But that was the year that was 2020 for all the sports, really. But college football, I thought, was really impacted. Any collegiate sport, for that matter, I thought really had no business trying to play through a pandemic, to be honest with you, because these guys don't get paid. So I didn't think it was going to happen. I didn't think it needed to happen, but it did. And now we can put a bow on what was the 2020 college football season and start looking towards the draft. And I thought it was no better game to do that with than the one we saw last night, because of so many of the guys that played last night that have a chance to play on Sundays if they elect to bypass more college football in pursuit of their NFL dreams this upcoming spring. So we'll talk about the guys that piqued interest, guys that we know are going to the next level, and how they fared in their final collegiate game and what are the prospects for them moving forward. And honestly, that's where I want to start. So without any further delay, let's get straight into the shits on this lovely Tuesday afternoon here on the LouieTeeNetwork podcast with something that I like to call the Gem Droppin Session. Let me drop this gem on your melon. Open your mind, let your conscience be free. You're now rolling with your man, Louie T double E. Let me do that again. That kind of came out a little sloppy. And, you know, had some chips before I came on. I feel like Tony Romo during halftime of that Saints-Bears game where he was finishing up whatever he was trying to scarf down before Jim Nantz threw it to him. And Tony was going to work on that food. And he was trying to hurry up and get all of the extra residue out of his teeth and finish up. They didn't have to do my man Tony like that, but let's try that again. Open your mind, let your conscience be free. You're now rolling with your man, Louie T double E. Let me open you up. Get you thinking a little bit. That was much better, man. I feel you, Tony. I feel you. I had some chip residue up there in the corner. Kind of got me caught there. I'm all good now, though. So, I want to talk about the national championship game. And for me, that's always, I don't want to say it's the start of me getting my draft juices flowing, because usually for me it's the combine, but this year it's different because this is what I do now. So I can now focus all my attention on the draft as the last game of the college football season is in the books. And now they'll turn their attention to the Senior Bowl. And we still are awaiting word whether the NFL is going to move forward full steam ahead with the combine, and how are they going to handle all of the off-season extracurricular activities that come with the draft process. Are they going to handle it like they did last year, where there weren't any extracurricular draft processes? Early in March, you got a couple of teams that were able to get theirs off, but for the most part, they shut the faucets off. There were no pro days. There were no individual meetings with teams. All of that got cut off, and you essentially had to go to the tape. And you were able to do virtual meetings with these guys, and that may happen this year, but you weren't able to work guys out in person, and you weren't able to go to pro days and see these guys run, jump, test them, all of those good things. So it'd be interesting to see if the pandemic, because it's not much better than it was last year, and you know more about it now than you did last year, and I think it's very likely that you don't see any of those things transpire. Anyhow, 52-24 beatdown was commenced by the Alabama Crimson Tide to the Ohio State Buckeyes. I'd be lying to you if I said I was surprised. I did a video impromptu last night. Everybody kept asking me on Twitter, was I going to do a video afterwards? I wasn't going to. I wasn't planning to, because I'm not a college football guy, and I don't pretend to be. But I told you I was going to be watching that game in particular because of all of the NFL prospects playing in that particular game. And so all eyes was going to be on that game. I wanted to see what was going to transpire and how these guys, under that white hot light of the national championship game, was going to play. And, these things matter, In the biggest games against the best competition, how do you fare? And I want to start with Devontae Smith. So first of all, just a quick synopsis of the game. And I did this last night, so I really don't feel like I need to do this again. But the game itself was good to start. You know what it felt like to me? It felt like Bama Clemson from 2 years ago. When, was that last year? Nope, 2 years ago. I was right. Last year was Joe Burrow and LSU over Clemson. The year before that was the Bama Clemson national championship game, in which Clemson destroyed Alabama. It started out very competitive, looked like it was going to be a shootout, tit for tat, and then Clemson just devoured Alabama and ran away with that thing to the point where, like midway through the third quarter, I was at my mom and dad's, was watching the game with Boss, and me and my son had come over. We had watched the game with my dad, and by the third quarter, we were packing our stuff up and we were getting ready to hit the road to go home. So that's what this game felt like. I remember tweeting out late stages of the first. Oh, I figured out what the final score is going to be: 70-63 Bama, because it looked like neither one of these teams could stop each other. And then Bama got a stop, and then they were able to force another stop with a field goal. But the problem was Ohio State didn't get the memo that, hey, you could actually get stops in this game. You don't have to actually let them score a touchdown. And Devontae Smith, you can actually cover him. And look, you could actually do it with multiple players if need be. There's no rule that says you can't cover one guy with more than one guy. You can cover him with as many as you like. And I said, hey, why not just put all 11 on him? If you can't stop him with one or two, why not put 11 on him? Just a thought. Anyway, Devontae Smith was ridiculous. Alabama was the superior team. We knew that going in. They proved it again. College football, for all intents and purposes, is an exercise in futility. It's going to be the same teams every single year until Nick Saban and Dabo Swinney decide that this isn't what they want to do anymore, or they find a different challenge that they want to take on. This is what it's going to be. It's either going to be Clemson or Alabama. In every maybe 4 or 5 years, an Auburn or an LSU or Florida or somebody like that may jump in there and disrupt one of those two teams from winning the national championship. But let's be honest with ourselves. I don't care what fan of a team you are. You already know what this is. It's not unlike the NBA where the best team always wins, because in the NBA, the best team always wins. Always. You know, unless injuries start to take effect, like it did a couple of years ago when I still think the Raptors were the better team, but we'll never know when they beat Golden State because injuries took effect. Bottom line is, those are playoffs that are won with series. So generally in a series, the more you play, the better team will prevail. But this is a one-game situation. It's a playoff situation in which winner takes all and survive and advance. And yet in college football, it never ceases to amaze me that the outcome is usually what we expect it to be. And Alabama kind of reinforced that, and I said last night, Ohio State isn't any different than Oklahoma or Notre Dame. They're going to get here because their talent is better than the next wave. But it's waves in college football. There's Alabama and Clemson, and you can put Ohio State in there if you want to talk about, level of talent. But for whatever reason, Ohio State isn't able to squeeze the rag like Clemson and Alabama are able to squeeze the rag and get the most out of their talent. So I almost want to take Ohio State and just move them down a notch, even though their talent is right on par. If we're talking just from a talent perspective, it's right on par with the Alabama and Clemson talent, but they don't get the most out of their talent like Clemson and Alabama do. So I would put Notre Dame and Ohio State and Oklahoma on the next tier down. And those are the teams that will get there. They'll get through their schedule 11 and 12 and 0. They'll navigate their way through some bumps in the road during the course of the season, some near misses, and they'll get to the playoffs because of their name and because of their record. But they're not going to threaten anybody. They're not going to win against a Bama or a Clemson. They're going to get steamrolled, as a matter of fact, more times than not. And it's going to ultimately be Bama and Clemson. Until somebody breaks this cycle, I don't see it changing. Alabama reinforced that again last night. But I will say this. The amount of talent that we saw on the field last night isn't any different than what we usually see in a national championship game, because it's usually Bama, Clemson, it's usually Clemson and LSU or somebody like that with a bunch of talented football players. You don't get to the national championship without a bunch of talented football players. So we saw a game last night with a ton of NFL talent on the field. And I just want to run through the list individually and give you my thoughts on what I saw last night, and then kind of give you a preview of what's to come as we get into draft season with these players if they decide to declare for the NFL draft. So I want to start with Devontae Smith because he won the Heisman Trophy. He's a polarizing guy because on one hand, he was the most dominant player in college football this year, one of the most dominant wide receivers we've ever seen. Now, I've seen college football over the span of, 30 years that I've been on this planet plus. And I've seen some dominant years for wide receivers. Peter Warrick back in 2001, something in there. That comes to mind. He was electric and dynamic. People forget about how good Peter Warrick was. This was a little bit different here, because Peter Warrick was more of an athlete that played wide receiver. Devontae Smith is a pure wide receiver. He can return punts and things of that nature, be dynamic there. But he's so small. Everybody wants to talk about his size. He's 6 feet, about $175. And so his frame is pretty thin. It's real thin, actually. But nobody cares about that if you're a baller, and he's a baller. And so Devontae Smith, for me, he solidified himself as a top 10 pick in this draft. The question is he the first receiver off the board? I think a lot of people fell in love with Devontae Smith over the life of this college football season. And, last night was an exclamation point on what was a hell of a season, a historic season, if you will, in college football for Devontae Smith. However, and I said this last night, if you just turn back the clock a year ago this time, the guy that was all the rage at the wide receiver position was Jamar Chase. Why? Because he was the most present and forefront in our minds. Why? Because he had just gone out and did the same thing that Devontae Smith did last night to Clemson and cornerback A.J. Terrell. So it's easy to forget about Jamar Chase because he didn't play this season. But I think it's between those two guys as to who's going to be drafted first. And again, it's all about what's your flavor. For me, personally, it's going to be interesting to see. I'm not going to tell you what I think yet. I'm going to save that for when we start getting into the nitty gritty of these positions and where I rank everyone. But that was really impressive last night. 12 catches, 215, 3 touchdowns in one half of work. It's utterly ridiculous. And what was so funny to me is just how bad Ohio State was in identifying where this guy was. You got to give credit to Steve Sarkisian, who's going to be the new Texas head coach. And speaking of which, while I'm at it, Bill O'Brien has found himself a new job as he will be the new offensive coordinator at Alabama next year, taking over for Steve Sarkisian, who's moving on to be the head man. I think I said Texas. It's Texas, right? I think it's Texas. I feel confident that it's Texas. Yeah, Herman is out. Tom Herman's out. So it'll be interesting to see if he does a great job of moving guys around, because it was so hard to account for where Devontae Smith was going to be on the field. But it's still not hard to figure out that you can't allow a middle linebacker to be running down the field with him alone. It's amazing. That linebacker swore he had safety help over the top and should have, and his safety just bailed on him. And it was funny. I tweeted this out. Somebody said that Tough Borland's check engine light came on. If you see how hard Tough Borland was running after Devontae Smith, despite not gaining any ground and actually losing ground, but he was running his absolute hardest. Looked like he was about to blow a tire. The fact that somebody said his check engine light came on, that's an all-time classic line for me on Twitter. Right there, that was good stuff. But Devontae Smith, outside, inside, it didn't matter. Quick pass, deep pass, it didn't matter. They had no answers for him. And NFL, college, NFL, SEC, Big 10, Big 12, it doesn't matter. This guy can play football. I think that's what last night and really this entire season has pretty much wrapped up for him and hammered home the point that this guy can play. It doesn't matter where he is or how big he is or how fast he runs or any of the stuff that we kind of get wrapped up in sometimes. This guy can play football. Chris Olave, I want to just kind of stick with the skill guys for a second. Really like him. Somebody had asked me about Chris Olave last night, and I had already talked about him, but I'll reiterate that I really like Chris Olave. I don't think he's a number one wide receiver at the next level, but I do think he is a legitimate number two, a high-end number two. He may even turn out to be a low-end number one, But I look at him, I should save this for my, breakdowns. But I'll just throw this out here. He reminds me of Tyler Boyd. And I think that's what my comp for him is going to be. I'm going to watch more tape. But just looking at him, and I told you a lot of times with my comps, how I configure them is just who's the first name that pops in my head when I watch you? Like, what vibes do you give me? And again, Tyler Boyd, I don't think he's a number one. He's a low-end one, but a very, very high-end number two. One of the best number twos in the league. And that's how I view Chris Olave right now. So I really like him. I thought there was an injustice done last night with Jalen Waddle. I talked about this last night, so I don't really want to beat this horse. It's been long dead already. And I saw outrage that kind of mirrored mine on socials last night with Nick Saban's usage of Jalen Waddle. At some point, you as a coach have to protect your players from themselves. I thought that was a criminal injustice done by Nick Saban last night. And it's an indictment on him, if you ask me, that he's more concerned with winning. I don't give a damn how badly Jalen Waddle wanted to get on the field and how much he begged you and how hard he worked to get back to play in that game. You don't put him in there and risk his future over one game. And it seemed like Nick Saban put the success of this season and another chance at a national championship over the health of one of his players. And if I'm a player watching that, most guys aren't going to care. Most young 18-year-olds, 17-year-olds aren't going to give a damn about that. They're not thinking about that. All they're thinking about is, this is my best path to the next level, and so I'm going to take it. But if I'm watching that at home, if I'm a dad, if I'm a mom, I don't want my kid playing for a coach that's going to risk my son's future for one game. To me, that was selfish by Nick Saban. You could see the kid was impacted. You know, and if he worked that hard and everything you've seen in practice was of a guy that was 100% and you got medical clearance from the medical staff and they said, hey, this guy's 100% healed. It's just about his ability to adjust to some discomfort and he's looked good in practice and you feel good about him. Okay, you put him out there. And then after you see him on that first catch and run, limp back to the sidelines and shows you that he can't do it, and that he's compromised, I don't put him back out there. And I say, hey, Jalen, I go over to him personally and I say, hey, Jalen, love you, man. Love what you did for this team. Love the sacrifice that you made trying to get back here to play in this game, but I won't let you do it. Love you. I tap him on the shoulder, give him a nice little hug on the helmet, and then I go back to calling the game. He's not going back in. No, under any circumstance. I don't care that Devontae Smith gets injured in the second half and now you need him. He's not going back in the game because I care more about my players and their safety and their futures than I do about one game. And he didn't convey that message last night. Quite the opposite, actually. So I thought that was really selfish on the part of Nick Saban. But Jalen Waddle is a guy that we've always talked about as a first-round talent. There's a question as to whether he's going to come out or not, being that his season ended the way that it did. Does he go back to Alabama? I didn't think Devontae Smith was going back. I didn't think Najee Harris was going back last year. I didn't think Alex Leatherwood was going back last year. All of those guys went back to school last year. So I wouldn't count Jalen Waddle out just yet going back to Bama after seeing the way things transpired. But he won a national championship, unlike the group last year who didn't win a national championship. There isn't any unfinished business here. If you're Jalen Waddle, you gave everything you could give. You won a national championship in your last year. If I were you, I would just go ahead and make the leap to the NFL. I still think he's going to ultimately be a first-round pick. Everybody understands the talent that is Jalen Waddle. But I just thought that was an interesting dynamic last night. Najee Harris. I told you my respect for him grew at the end of last year, as I thought he was going to declare, and I started watching Najee Harris film, and also just watching all of the Bama players, you couldn't help but run into Najee Harris over and over and over, and watching LSU players, because there were a ton of them drafted last year, especially on the defensive side of the football, and you just couldn't help running into Najee Harris over and over and over and over and over, and saying, man, the more I watched him, the more I was impressed. And this season to me was really one of the few times when I tell a running back, you made the right decision going back to school, because of all the positions in college and into the pros that I look at and say, you have no business putting any extra tread on the tires whatsoever, it's the running back position, because we all know it's no country for old men. And so the faster you can get to the league, nobody wants to pay running backs the money that they deserve. We're going to see Aaron Jones hit the market here shortly with the Green Bay Packers, more likely than not. Nobody wants to pay running backs, and Todd Gurley getting his deal and then not performing, and Le'Veon Bell's situation doesn't make it any easier for teams to feel comfortable giving backs big money. But you want to get to the NFL as soon as possible. Najee Harris passed up an opportunity to go back to school to try to win a national championship, and I think he actually really elevated his draft stock in doing so. Like that's one of the few times where I tell a guy bravo for going back to school as a running back. But he's exceptional. I don't know about you, and I don't know how you guys feel. Hide the stopwatch when it comes to this dude. He's not fast. I don't care. He can catch. He's physical. The first guy never brings him down. He's a load to deal with. You can run your offense through him. You know what he reminds me of? Le'Veon Bell. And remember, Le'Veon Bell coming out of Michigan State was a 4'6" guy. He was big. Nobody thought he was going to be dynamic, which is why he lasted, I think, until the third round, I believe, when the Steelers got him. If it wasn't the third, it was late second whatever the case may be, nobody expected much of Le'Veon Bell, which is why he lasted as long as he did. And he came in and he changed the game. Why? Because he could catch it out of the backfield as well as run it. Now, he doesn't have the same hesitation as Le'Veon Bell and that patience, but in terms of physicality and the ability to catch it, this dude is a game changer, man. I'm so impressed with Najee Harris. He's a first-round back. He's a first-round back for me. Trey Sermon, really unfortunate what happened to him. Literally his first carry of the game, he gets injured. Looks like it's a collarbone injury. I haven't really heard any updates, but you know a collarbone injury when you see it. You know, it looks like a clavicle might have been shattered there or something along those lines. And you hate to see it for a guy that was a senior that transferred from Oklahoma to Alabama and had been coming on like gangbusters of late. And you were seeing his stock just continue to rise over this, last 4 or 5 game stretch where he was just lighting it up. And it's unfortunate that it ends this way. And we'll see what that does to his draft stock. I can't imagine that I can't imagine that it doesn't hurt it. It's definitely not going to help it, but I think it might actually impact him very negatively. It sucks because he could have easily been the third running back off the board after Najee Harris and Travis Etienne. Now, I think he kind of falls down the board a bit, personally. We'll see what happens with him. Now you get to the quarterbacks. You get Mac Jones and Justin Fields. And I want to start with Mac Jones because I had some interesting debates about him last night. My feelings on Justin Fields aren't set in stone yet, but they're pretty damn close. Like the cement mixer is mixing up my thoughts on him. And it's just a matter of time before I dump it down and I smooth it out and I just let it dry. I got some more film to study, but I've studied film on him already. So I kind of know what I'm getting myself into. A lot of what I saw last year and even some games early this year, like the Penn State game and things of that nature where he looked a lot better. I still get those vibes from last year and I saw what I saw in this game. But let's talk about Mac Jones first. Oh, Michael Jones. There's a real conversation to be had about Mac Jones. And I kind of laid it all out last night. And I felt like I did a good job of laying it out last night. So I don't want to spend too much time on Mac Jones, but here's the thing. And we're going to talk about him a ton. And just like we are the rest of these quarterbacks that are going to be in the 2021 NFL draft. Here's the thing with Mac Jones. All it takes is one. Is he a first round pick? I don't know. All it takes is one. Is he a guy that you can strap, your football team to and have him lead you to a victory? I don't know. I don't think so. Personally, I don't think so. Is he going to be a tough evaluation? Yes. There was a ton of talent around him. Impossible to ignore. It's almost like the same thing at Ohio State when you're looking at a guy like Dwayne Haskins. And I'm not comparing the two. But it was a hard evaluation for Dwayne because Dwayne clapped twice, as we like to say in Washington. He clapped twice and threw 50 touchdowns to wide open receivers all season long in his final year at Ohio State. And so it's hard to evaluate some of these guys when the talent around them is so great. And the strength of competition and the level of competition around them doesn't match the level of talent that you have around that quarterback. So it makes their job that much easier. And you're not seeing them throw in the tight windows, and you're not seeing them have to make some tough decisions. And I think with Mac Jones, what I learned last night and really throughout the course of watching him over a season and a half, because he pretty much started the remainder of the year last year after Tua went down. And what I learned was that this guy has mental toughness. I think he's a physically tough guy. I watched him against Notre Dame. He was a little banged up. Watched him last night try to slide and I think it was Borland that fell on his ankle, and so his ankle got rolled up on and he stayed in the game. So he's shown me some toughness. I think he's got an NFL arm, and I think he can make throws to any portion of the field that he needs to. And I think that his mobility, and that's one of the biggest debates with him, outside of the talent and can he really, dissect an NFL defense into some tight windows, is the athleticism or lack thereof. I think he's mobile enough. I got a comp in my head. I'm going to save that one for when we get to these quarterback breakdowns. But I got a comp in my head, and I feel really good about that comp as we move forward. But he's going to be interesting. I think the evaluations on him are going to be all over the place. I think you're going to have some people that love him, some people that think he's a third-round pick. You're going to have a lot of people in between. I think when it's all said and done, the dust settles, smoke clears, I think he ends up a second-round pick. Yeah, I don't think he's going to be a third. I don't think he's going to be a first. I think we meet somewhere in the middle on Mac Jones, and he ends up being a second-round draft pick. But we know how these quarterbacks go. And as I mentioned, all it takes is one. And so all it takes is for one team to decide, I want that fifth-year option and that availability on Mac Jones, and I want to be able to figure it out on him. And I want that fifth year to be able to have it if I need it. So I'm going to pull the trigger on him at the back end of the first round. We'll see what happens. As far as Justin Fields is concerned, I was really looking to see if there was a continuation from the 6-touchdown performance versus Clemson into this game. And I said, that was Clemson. This is Alabama. And you know, I really felt like he could go out and do some things because neither the Clemson nor Alabama defense this season were elite. This, you know, just because of, you know, the COVID situation and with certain guys not playing and, you know, and a lot of these teams losing players to the draft and having young guys have to step up. It was a really interesting year for them defensively. Both of those teams who are usually dynamic defensively. And so I thought he could go out and early on it looked like he was going to do exactly that. I thought he was going to be able to go out and have some success, but it just wasn't meant to be. And I thought he struggled in this game. I thought he struggled with making reads quickly. I thought he struggled with decisiveness. Look, you don't like what you see, just take off and run. Go now. I thought he struggled with ball velocity. There were a lot of wobbly balls. And, you know, for a guy his size, 6'3", a lot of batted balls too. That was pretty disappointing. A lot of balls got tipped at the line of scrimmage. You know, he didn't seem to be able to have a really firm grasp on when to put touch and velocity, you know, on the ball, and then when to throw, you know, a ball that was a little hot sauce to go on it. I talked about that late touchdown opportunity that was missed when he rolled out of the pocket. Did a really good job, actually, of stepping up in the pocket, buying some time, and then finding that guy on a fourth down in the back of the end zone. But he just put too much on it, and he was inaccurate on that throw. And he didn't need to do that. And really, for the vast majority of the night, everything was soft. Seemed like everything took an extra tick to get there. Somehow guys were still coming down with the football, but, you know, I didn't think he was impressive at all last night. But I've never really been all that impressed with Justin Fields to begin with, to be honest with you, if we're keeping it a buck with one another. So I got a lot of what I expected out of him. You know, there was this really, I thought, erroneous reaction to his 6 touchdowns, and, you know, everyone, oh, well, you know, the Jags have a decision. No, they don't. They don't have a decision to make. Justin Fields is not the number one quarterback in this draft class. And I've already told you, I think Trevor Lawrence is good. He's not Andrew Luck. He's not Joe Burrow. But he's the best this quarterback draft class has to offer. So he's going to be your number one pick. I didn't think it was a decision then, and I damn sure don't think it's one to make now after watching him last night. This is who Justin Fields has been. In these types of games, he hasn't stepped up and elevated his game to rise to the level that it is necessary for his team to have a chance to win. You know, we saw it last year against Clemson in the playoffs. I thought he wasn't all that great against Indiana in their biggest game in the Big Ten this year. I thought he was really mediocre at best versus Northwestern in the Big Ten championship game. And, you know, he had that one game that felt like an aberration against Clemson. You know, and you can go back earlier in the season against Penn State and some of those games where he was lighting teams up and only had like 2 or 3 incompletions. That's cool. But those games didn't rise to the level of some of these other games, and he just hasn't performed big in these spots. And you'll get some people making excuses for him. Oh, he was banged up, he was this, he was that, whatever. I know how I feel about Justin Fields. We'll see what he does at the next level. Patrick Surtain II really didn't get tested very often last night. He's a legit number one corner at the next level. He's got the NFL bloodlines. He's got the size you're looking for at 6'2", about 210 pounds. He looks the part, man. He looks the part, and I fully expect him to be one of the first corners to hear their name called in the upcoming draft, along with Caleb Farley of Virginia Tech. So it'll be interesting to see. He didn't play this year. Surtain did. Will that make a difference? We'll see. But Patrick Surtain II will definitely hear his name called relatively early in this draft. Maybe the same can be said for Christian Barmore. I'm not necessarily a humongous Christian Barmore fan. Necessarily not saying that he's not good. I don't think he's elite. But I can't tell you the last time I saw an elite defensive tackle come out in the draft anyway. You know, if we're looking at the last 3 or 4 years of defensive tackles, he probably fits in somewhere in there. He's not better than Derek Brown from last year, but he's not, too far behind some of the guys we've seen come out. If we're just lining him up with the rest of these Bama defensive tackles, yeah, he's right up in there. The Marcel Dariuses, the Jonathan Allens, Deron Paynes, I'll tell you this, he's not Jaron Reed, who I think was, of all those guys I just named, I think Jaron Reed might be the best pass rusher of that group. Ashawn Robinson, all of those guys that have come out of that Bama defensive tackle pipeline of late. The guy that looked like he was going to be the scariest was the one that the Jets took a couple of years back. Still haven't really seen it, or it might have been last year. Still haven't really seen it from him. There were flashes, but I think he could be the most dominant of that group. But I don't really see it with this Christian Barmore fella here. But we'll see. I got a lot of tape to watch. I'm just talking about my first impression of him, so I can't really make any declarative statements on him. Shaun Wade, I thought he was embarrassing last night. Let's not pull any punches. Let's call a spade a spade. He was embarrassing last night. And my man over at who is he working with now? He's all over the place. He's a beast. And I've had him on my podcast several times. Jordan Reed tweeted out last night that he'd like to see Shaun Wade go back to school and go to safety, because a lot of people think that he's a safety. And by looking at him last night, safety and if you play free safety, that means you also got to be able to play a little bit of the slot, because you got to drop down over the slot at times. That might be his calling at the next level, because he damn sure can't play out wide. We saw that last night, and I think that was very evident last night. He got tortured last night, and it wasn't close. He didn't put up a fight. He waved the white flag last night. So it might be in his best interest to go back to school. If he doesn't go back to school and put some really good tape on as a safety, and he decides I'm ready, he could easily be a 5th round pick, and kind of just fall by the wayside. He like one of those situations where I don't often tell guys you should go back to school. Shaun Wade should go back to school. That was embarrassing last night. And then just a couple of other names that won't get a lot of notoriety because they either play positions that allow them to be in obscurity, or you just not really thinking about these guys. Wyatt Davis and Josh Myers on that offensive line for Ohio State on the interior are two guys that are going to come off the board relatively quick. They'll be gone either day one, no later than the second round, early portion of day 2. I think those guys are, and if you ask me, the center, Josh Myers, probably has a better shot than Wyatt Davis of coming off the board in the first round. But, we'll see what ends up happening. Alex Leatherwood for Alabama was a guy that I thought was going to come out last year, went back to school, and I think it benefited him another year of seasoning at the left tackle position for Alex Leatherwood. Most people think he's going to have to kick inside to guard, and we'll see if that actually comes to fruition or not. But he's big, he's athletic, he's got good feet. I think there's a home for him. And you know how I feel about offensive linemen, specifically tackles that are being told that they're more likely than not going to have to get kicked inside the guard. Until you prove to me that you can't, I'm going to give you every opportunity to prove that you can. And so I feel that same way with Alex Leatherwood, not kicking him inside the guard until he proves that he can't play tackle. So I want to see what he looks like. He's got all the measurables. He's 6'5", 34-inch arms, I believe. We'll get the exact measurements. Good feet. I think he can get it done. We'll see what happens. And then Jeremy Ruckert is a guy that I talked about last night watching the game. He's come on these last two games in the postseason. Had a good game against Clemson, a couple touchdown grabs in that game. Had like 5 catches. That's when he first caught my attention. And then he made the circus catch over the middle of the field, and he showed his athleticism, being able to stretch the football field vertically, ran right by that Alabama defender. He's big, he's 6'5", he's 250. I think he's 255. And he blocks. I'm intrigued with this kid, and he didn't even come to Ohio State as a tight end. So he's still learning the position, so to speak. But if he decides to come out, that's the kind of player I'm looking for Washington to draft right there. Not a guy that you're going to have to draft in the first or the second round. He'll be around in the third round for you, fourth round maybe even, depending on how the draft shakes out. But I would love it if there is no combine. No one can get a time on this kid because I can tell he can run. I don't want everybody else kind of catching up to what he's doing because this dude is talented, man. You know it when you see it. 6'5", long arms, soft hands, really good athlete, can block in the run game, still learning. He's a sponge. He soaks all of this information up. He's got a good head on his shoulders. I listened to him talk, and I read up on him last night after learning that he was a junior. I'm intrigued. Interest is piqued. I'd love it if no one else really was able to uncover this gem here before the draft. If he decides to come out again, he's eligible to go back to Ohio State, and we'll see what he decides to do. But he took a shot last night. He took a shot from Battle when he was ejected from the game due to targeting, but he stayed in, continued to fight. I like Jeremy Ruckert quite a bit. So that's going to do it for the Gem Droppin Session. Alabama 52-24 winners, but it was more about the individual players than anything else. I already felt like the outcome of the game had been decided once these two teams, advanced to the championship game. I didn't think Ohio State, first of all, was going to beat Clemson, so the fact that they did, it was an upset, and nobody expected them to beat Alabama, and they didn't. So that's kind of my synopsis on the game and the individual players, and obviously there's plenty more of that to come as we start to dive knee-deep into the 2021 NFL Draft. But let's go ahead and transition to the playoff picture, and more specifically, Wild Card Weekend. It was Super Wildcard Weekend for the first time in NFL history, as 14 teams made it to the postseason for the first time in NFL history with the new format, 7 in each conference, 1 bye for each conference. So only the 1 seeds were able to advance to the divisional round without playing a game. So that, in essence, forced 3 games to transpire on both sides of the bracket. And I don't think we were really disappointed this weekend with the action we got. To me, there was only 1 game that I was like, I didn't even put it on the marquee. That's the reason I didn't put it on the marquee, because it was just, it was that kind of game. Of course, I'm talking Bears and Saints, but everything else, every other game I thought had good entertainment value, offered up some kind of nutritional value. I thought that the Bears-Saints game was a bunch of junk food, and if you decided to bypass it, I don't blame you. But we start with the game that kicked off Wildcard Weekend, Colts and Bills, and you could argue it was the best game start to finish the entire weekend. Now, I'm biased. I enjoyed the Washington game. The game that I enjoyed the most was the first game on Sunday, actually, Titans and Ravens. But you could argue that the best actual game was Colts-Bills, and the Bills were victorious 27-24, had to hang on late. A lot of ups and downs in this game. We've talked about every single one of these games already, so I don't want to get into, an extensive breakdown because we've done that already. I just want to kind of point out some little things. It's almost like an extension of Thursday night leftovers. This is wildcard weekend leftovers, if you will. And so I thought there were some controversial decisions in the game. Obviously, we talked about that with Frank Wright not kicking a field goal. You had the penalty on Kamoko Torre that really hurt you. That's a 4-point penalty in a game. You lose by 3. Going for the 2-point conversion the first time around, again, it didn't really hurt them because then after not converting the first time, they converted it the second time, which allowed them to get back to a point where they would have been had they just kicked 2 extra points. So, yeah, there were some controversial decisions, but honestly, the only one that I thought really impacted the game significantly was the decision to bypass the field goal and go for it on fourth and goal from the 4, and they did not convert. Thought that was the wrong decision, and you could argue it was a 10-point swing. You go from getting a field goal to then giving up a touchdown to the Bills on that possession right before the half. Again, who's to say what would have happened if they would have kicked the field goal, made it? The Bills still would have had plenty of time on the clock and a full complement of timeouts. They probably would have been able to, get down the field and at least get in the field goal range, if not score the touchdown like they did. So it is what it is. I thought the officials missed a call late on a fumble by Zach Pascal that should have been ruled in the Bills' favor, but the football gods evened everything out at the end of the game, not allowing the Colts to get into field goal range. A guy that I don't think enough people talked about after this game, who was an unsung hero, is Bills tackle Darrell Williams. Without Darrell Williams hustling and recovering that late fourth quarter Josh Allen fumble, the Bills aren't still in the playoffs. I'm just telling you right now, they lose that football game. Because the Colts were just steamrolling this Bills defense late. And that would have been a recovery in Bills territory with about 6 minutes left. And they were only trailing by 3 at the time. They were going to get 7 if that turnover happens. But Darrell Williams hustles, dives, and is able to wrestle away that football from what looked like an easy Colts recovery. I think Darrell Williams needs a little bit more credit than he's being given as we sit here on Tuesday getting ready for the divisional round of the postseason. Without his recovery, I don't think the Bills advance to divisional weekend in the postseason. Zach Moss, Bills rookie running back, had a really good rookie campaign, but it now has come to an end. He injured himself in the game. There was a substantial ankle injury. He had to be carted off the field. You hoped for the best, but you feared the worst. The worst has been confirmed. There is a broken ankle there, and he is done for the remainder of the postseason. And that seems to be a lengthy process for him to get back onto the field. We hope that his rehab process goes really well. Phillip Rivers, final game in a Colts uniform, maybe final game as an NFL pro. Very possible. We'll see what happens with him. I thought that Phillip Rivers showed that there's still more football. I can tell you this. I walked away from this game saying that Phillip Rivers still has more football left in him than Ben Roethlisberger does at this point. That's just me, personally. If I were the Steelers, I'd much rather have Phillip Rivers than Ben Roethlisberger right now. That's not a choice. I'm just telling you how I feel watching him on the field. He was outstanding in this game, and he gave the Colts a chance to win this football game. So they've got a decision to make there, and Phillip himself has the decision to make as to whether he wants to continue to play football or not. Hell of a football game. Really enjoyed it thoroughly. I thought it was a great start to Wildcard Weekend. Those two teams did not disappoint. The Bills will now host the Baltimore Ravens in the divisional round. The next game up on the docket was Rams-Seahawks, NFC West family business. You know how the family do it, and this game did not go the way that I thought. I was flat out wrong about this game. 30-20. First of all, 50 combined points. You never would have gotten me to guess that they would have been more than 40 points scored combined in this game. Hell, I thought we wouldn't even get to 30 combined points in this game, to be honest. I think I predicted the score would be 17-9. So that's 26 total points. So the fact that these two teams combined for 50 points after their last matchup, where I'm not sure the two teams combined for 30 points, is amazing to me. Let's kind of go through this thing in chronological order. So John Wolford gets the start for the Rams. Jared Goff tests the finger or his thumb, feels good enough to go, but Sean McVay says, "Nah, we're gonna roll with John Wolford, man. You stand by. We don't know if we'll need you, but it's good to know that if we do, you'll be there waiting." And sure enough, second possession of the game, John Wolford goes down on a hit from Seahawks safety Jamal Adams, injures his neck, not able to return, ends up ultimately being loaded up on a gurney and taken to a hospital, nearby hospital via ambulance from the stadium. He would later be tested and released, and he was allowed to rejoin his team and celebrate the win. But it was a scary moment, obviously. And so Jared Goff has to come in. And Jared Goff has been just crucified this year. I mean, I can't talk about how many fans out there, people that watch this show as viewers, that just talk so much trash about Jared Goff and how bad he is and how this offense isn't any good, and because Jared Goff is always turning it over and this, that, and the third. And I thought the toughness, the gutsiness, and the moxie shown by Jared Goff in this game can't be understated. I mean, for him to first have to clear that mental hurdle of essentially being benched, call it what it was. He could have played if McVay believed in him. And let's just say that he was Tom Brady or he was Aaron Rodgers or he's Drew Brees. If those guys tell you they can go, you're going to put him in there. You know, he doesn't, I don't know if there's quite the trust necessary there or not. And maybe it's warranted at this point with all the turnovers. And I've talked about how the Rams are one of the few teams, if not the only team this year, that has had a turnover into every single game this season. And nonetheless, they didn't have a choice. They had to go to Goff. And I thought he showed some heart, man. You know, that thumb not right. And there were a couple that just got away from him because of him not being able to, grip the ball the way that he wants. But I thought he went out and he gave them a chance, man. And he moved a lot better than I've seen him move in past games. The throw to Cam Akers on the sidelines, that's all Jared Goff stepping up, looking like he's about to scramble, seeing his running back out in the flats at the last second, getting it to him, and the Red Sea's parted. He's down the sidelines and he's making a big play and setting up a touchdown opportunity. That was all Jared Goff. So I thought Goff did some good things, ran this offense, managed the game, and the biggest thing was he didn't make that back-breaking mistake that Seattle was counting on him making. He just didn't. And with the way they play defense in Los Angeles, if he doesn't turn it over, if they don't turn it over, it's not just Jared Goff with the turnovers. If they don't turn the football over, they're going to be a tough out. I thought Jared Goff did some really good things in this game. Cam Akers was magnificent. And I told you when they got him in the second round out of Florida State, and I've always said, look, the Rams, I don't like the way that they just hand out first-round picks. They haven't had a first-round pick since they selected Jared Goff in the first round. Which, I mean, that tells you all you need to know. When was that? 2017, 2016, 2017? What are we talking about here? They haven't had a first-round pick in like 4 years. Yet they find ways to get really good football players. And Akers was another one of those gems that they were able to kind of just sit back and let fall into their lap. Perfect player for the type of offense they run, especially on the ground. And he was exceptional in this game, was Cam Akers. And we saw him coming at the end of the season. He continued that in this game. That Rams defense is filthy, man. And they're the best defense left in the playoffs. Now with the Colts out, I don't even think it's really close. And to take it a step further, all the elite defenses, for the most part, the Saints are still there. But all the elite defenses were dispatched of this weekend. All the perceived elite defenses. I mean, I guess you could consider the Ravens a really good defense. I think they've got their flaws, however. And I think the Saints, when they're healthy, Trey Hendrickson didn't play against the Bears. If they can get him back, he makes a massive difference. When the Saints are right, they're a very, very good defense. But to me, they're inconsistent at times. The Rams are the best defense left in the playoffs. And they proved it in this game. They were all over Russell Wilson, man. They really harassed him, made him uncomfortable. And I thought the biggest thing was they had to shut down Chris Carson in the run game and not give Russell Wilson a crutch. Make him feel like he's got to do it on his own, and that's exactly what they did. Dominant performance by the Rams. And if you're the Seahawks, how disappointed are you in the finish to this season and really this offense? I thought the defense gave you a chance. How disappointed are you in your offense? You look at this Seahawks offense, and I'm trying to think of the last impressive performance that they've had, because it's been a while. They weren't impressive versus Washington in Week 15. They weren't impressive in Week 16 offensively, even though they did beat the Rams. They weren't impressive in Week 17 versus the 49ers, even though they got that win. And they weren't impressive in this game. So I can't tell you the last time they were really impressive on offense. What a whimper. After starting the season out as hot as you did offensively, what a way to finish up, the season offensively. Man, you went meekly into the night offensively if you're the Seahawks. That's got to really, really, just not sit well with you if you're a Seahawks fan. Bucks, Washington. Bucks advanced 31-23, and what was a really entertaining game. I thought from an entertainment standpoint, those two teams did not disappoint on a Saturday night. Brady was Brady. Man, was he good. Man, was Tom Brady good. And, the irony of everything was the whole conversation about Chase Young. I want Tom Brady running off the field after they clinched the NFC East over Philadelphia in Week 17. And Bruce Arians then following up saying, hey, we know we got our hands full with him, but be careful what you wish for. And boy, did he ever get it. And Chase didn't come close to getting any sacks. I think the credit needs to go to that Tampa Bay Buccaneers offensive line first and foremost, because for the most part, they kept Brady upright, and he had so much time to throw the football. It was not close up front. I thought it was a no contest, the Bucs offensive line versus what was supposed to be a vaunted Washington defensive front. I thought the Bucs KO'd that Washington defensive front, and that was the difference in the game. Brady had all day to survey, and he was sacked 3 times was Brady in this game, but those weren't, the type of sacks that you needed to get. They needed to come early in the first quarter, and they needed to harass him, and that's not what happened in this game at all. And Brady, honestly, if Chris Godwin doesn't have 4 drops in this game, this is probably a 40-point performance for Tampa Bay. They were so good offensively in this game. As for Washington, I think the biggest surprise, obviously, is the play of Taylor Heineke and what he provided. A lot of people felt like, oh, Washington found their guy. Not exactly, but he makes things interesting this offseason, to say the least. Really disappointed in the way the defense played, but there is no reason to hang your head if you're a Washington fan after watching your team go out and hang tough. And they didn't play well. Washington did not play well in this game, especially on the defensive side. And for you to only lose by 8 and have the ball with a chance to tie late speaks volumes to how this team has fought all season long. But the Buccaneers will get some integral pieces back, including Devin White next week, as they will take on the New Orleans Saints for the 3rd time this season. And they're hoping that the 3rd time's the charm as they get it done. But they'll have to be better in the red zone because their red zone defense and offense, I thought, struggled in the game very mightily versus Washington. Ravens-Titans, my favorite game of the weekend. I've already stressed this, but this one was so much fun. The bad blood that is brewing now because of this matchup and the subsequent ones before it have now put this in a really different category in terms of NFL rivalries. We don't have a ton of rivalries that actually feel like rivalries, especially ones that are outside the division. I think this one kind of moves its way close to the top after the way that this thing kind of unfolded and the way it ended. And we saw Malcolm Butler stick his middle finger up at Lamar Jackson during the game. And we knew what the Titans had done to the Ravens earlier this season when they congregated on the Ravens logo. We've seen all of the things that the Ravens took as disrespect. And then we saw Lamar Jackson, not shake anybody's hand, and that became a thing. And I honestly feel like we're kind of embarking upon a brand new rivalry in the NFL, one that actually did exist before, but I think it may be back. Anyway, Lamar Jackson gets his first playoff victory. I mean, that's one of the biggest storylines coming out of the game. He rushed for 136 yards, and it really was his legs that really did the damage in this game. Derrick Henry, your reigning NFL rush champ, 2,000-yard rusher in 2020, was reduced to 48 yards on, I believe, 18 carries, 40 yards on 18 carries. Less than 3 yards a pop, less than 2.5 yards a pop. He was stymied in this football game, and that's a testament to the Baltimore Ravens defensive unit. Ryan Tannehill had to win this game, and I said as much in the lead up to the game, and on Twitter, like, he's got to win this game. The Ravens, they went out and made moves, and I've talked about this already, but the moves that they made this offseason were all to ensure that they would never be emasculated the way that they were against the Titans in the playoffs last year. So, trading for Calais Campbell and going out and signing Derek Wolfe and drafting Malik Harrison from Ohio State, who's a downhill thumper, and going out and getting the LSU linebacker in the first round. All of these moves were made, and Pernell McPhee being brought back. All these moves were made in mind to stop the run. And they did that in this game. And so it was on Tannehill's shoulders to go out and win it, and he just wasn't capable of doing it. Corey Davis was a non-participant in this game. I can't explain it. I don't know what that means for his pending free agency, and if that changes the Titans' mind, because in the last 2 games of the season when they really needed Corey Davis, I think they got a total of 2 catches in 2 games. So I don't know if that changes how they feel about Corey Davis, if they want him back or not. It doesn't change my mind on Corey Davis. I still want him. And there are a lot of different reasons as to why Corey Davis might not have been mentally stimulated. I talked about the whole having a baby situation. And then, his late brother, who just passed away from cancer like 2 months ago. It was his birthday this past weekend. So a lot of emotions for Corey Davis. Obviously, the first one without his brother here. So I don't know what impacted him, what didn't, what did. All I know is I still want him, okay? But he was not present in this game from a production standpoint. And then the disrespect, as I mentioned, the interception by Marcus Peters late. The entire Ravens defense essentially congregating on the Titans logo. A couple of guys sitting on it, a couple of other guys stomping on it and digging up turf. Some other guys posing on it, a lot of guys dancing on it. It was Marcus Peters spinning the ball on it and then dancing on it. Like, it was disrespect at its greatest. And then Lamar Jackson not shaking anybody's hands. And there's definitely some bad blood here, and I love it. Like I said, I enjoyed this game thoroughly. Ravens advanced 20-13. They'll be traveling to Orchard Park, New York to take on the second-seeded Buffalo Bills. Bears, Saints, I don't really have a lot to say about this game. Saints get the win 21-9. This was a snooze fest here. I will say this, Javon Wims dropped a touchdown that would have changed this game significantly, would have given the Bears an opportunity to potentially lead again. We don't know what would have happened, but at the time of the drop, it was 7-0. He catches that football, it's 7-7, and it's a different ball game. The Bears would force a turnover later on in the game of Drew Brees, and they got a field goal out of that. That might have been a 10-7 lead at that point. Who knows? Again, hindsight is 2020. Bottom line is the Bears offense was stale. It was unimaginative. They didn't move the football with any kind of success or regularity in this game. Again, credit the Saints defense for that. But we've seen this Bears offense go to sleep at various points of the season. So this isn't a surprise. Really disappointed in their inability to be able to scheme guys open. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, for whatever reason, seems to be able to get under some of these Bears wide receivers' skins. Remember, he got under the skin of Javon Wims. For whatever reason, Wims decided he wanted to open palm, punch him 3 times in the overtime loss versus the Saints in Chicago earlier this season. Got suspended for 2 games after that display. Then in this game, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson says something to Anthony Miller after a failed 3rd down, to which Anthony Miller decides he wants to jab him in his jaw again, and Anthony Miller gets tossed this time around. So I don't know what Chauncey Gardner-Johnson is saying to these Bears receivers, but he's definitely getting under their skin. Bottom line is the Saints win this game 21-9. I don't think really, after the 3rd quarter, I don't know if this game was really ever in doubt. And I tell you, they're not going to be able to play this brand of football and beat the Buccaneers next week. They're going to have to play with a greater sense of urgency and more. But they probably knew they could get by against the Bears with just this kind of effort. But next week, they're going to have to play, and they will. Trust me, it's family business. They can't stand the Buccaneers. They'll play with a greater sense of urgency next week. And I think we'll see the best of what the Saints have to offer. And hopefully they'll have Trey Hendrickson back for that game as well. And then finally, the nightcap, Browns-Steelers. What a game this was. Browns, wow. 28-0 at the end of the 1st quarter. I mean, the first play of the game from scrimmage for the Steelers was a microcosm of what the night would be. The first of 5 Steelers turnovers, a snap over the head of Ben Roethlisberger into the end zone, and me and my dad laughed about it later as Ben wanted no parts of that fumble. Ben could have recovered that thing 3 times over before any Browns defender could have gotten close, and Ben kind of just looks back and he sees his running back coming and, okay, I'll let him handle that. And then he muffs it, and then Ben tries to go, it's too late now, you had a chance. Ben's so old. It was funny, my man Reese said that Ben looks like someone's uncle that had a couple of Thanksgiving meals, is absolutely stuffed, and then allowed a couple of his nephews to coax him into going into the backyard to throw a couple of passes and run around a bit. Ben just looks so unathletic and so uncomfortable moving any other direction other than backwards. So anyway, that was a microcosm of things to come. They would turn it over 5 times in a game, 4 of them off the right arm of Ben Roethlisberger in this game. And the Browns, you got to give them credit. They took advantage of every single one of those turnovers. And not just, because we see this, and this is the thing that was so impressive. We talked about this Steelers defense and how vaunted it is and how they're going to have to carry this Steelers football team if they don't get some kind of production from the offense. And they've been good all year long, and so they're going to find a way. That was my thought process, not yours. A lot of you thought the Browns were going to win this game. And so that was my thought process. And here it is that the Cleveland Browns did whatever the hell they wanted to do to the Pittsburgh Steelers in this game from a offensive standpoint against that Steelers defense. They ran it. Kareem Hunt with a couple of first quarter touchdowns rushing the football. They threw it. Jarvis Landry continuing to work over the middle of the football field against Robert Spillane. I don't know why the Steelers felt like that was a advantageous matchup. Everybody could see clearly that they were trying to get that matchup with the personnel that they were putting on the field. So if I'm the Steelers, and the minute that they empty the set and they send Kareem Hunt in motion and spread him out, I'm telling my corner, you come inside and you take Jarvis Landry, and Spillane, you come out here and take this running back. Simple. It's not hard, man. They're coming out in 13 personnel, and then they're going to an empty set so that you put your linebacker on the field, and they're going to put Jarvis Landry on the inside. I saw it like 3 times. I'm like, they are killing you with this matchup. When are you going to make the adjustment? And they never did. And Jarvis Landry on some critical third downs exploited the middle of the football field. One time he ran a whip route and got to the outside on a third down against Spillane and ended up running down the sidelines. And then a play or two later, Nick Chubb is in the end zone on a 40-yard screen. And every time the Steelers tried to make it interesting, the Browns found ways to score. And so you got to credit them offensively for executing the way that they did at such a high level. And then you got to question, some of the decision making in this game. 4th and 1 from your own 46. The Steelers decide to punt the football. It might have been it was 4th and 1 from your own 46 at a point in the game where you can ill afford to punt the football. I think at that point they were down, if I'm not mistaken, at that point they were down 11. I think it might have been 9 actually that they were down at that point, 32-23. You needed to go for it right there. I don't think that was the right decision to punt the football in that particular instance. Because you weren't stopping the Cleveland Browns. Now, this is what I think he was thinking. I think they had gotten 2 straight stops before that. So he was thinking, if we punt this thing, and with the way the defense is starting to come on, we got momentum. If we get a stop, we'll get the football back and we'll have great field position. But it turned out to not be the case. That, as I just mentioned, that third down, Jarvis Landry runs a whip route, gets outside, and Spillane's not even close, and it's a first down. So, and the rest is history. They scored a touchdown there. They scored another touchdown. This Browns team, man. Ben, $41 million owed to Ben Roethlisberger next year. What the hell do you do? I mean, even if he retires or you cut him, still $22, I think it is, million dollars in terms of dead cap money. I mean, there's just nothing to do here. If I'm the Steelers, I go to Ben and I say, look, bro, we got to renegotiate, man. Like this, you're killing us here, man. And you know it. You want to win, right? You got to help us out, man. And if he's not willing to do it, then you might have to say, all right, Ben, then you got K-ass. I'm sorry. I don't want it to end this way, but you're killing us, man. Baker Mayfield heard saying Browns is the Browns running off the field. The famous Juju Smith-Schuster line. And they didn't need motivation. They didn't need it. He gave it to them. And again, athletes are looking for any motivation, even if none exists. They're looking for it. They gave it to him. And I credit this Browns football team. Not just the offense, but the defense for creating turnovers. And this is a gutsy effort, man. On the road to put up 48 speaks volumes about where this Browns team is. It's not the same old Browns. The Browns aren't just the Browns anymore. It's a different team. It's a different outlook. They're here to stay. They're not going away. And I'm really impressed with what they were able to do in this game. And I think this is a Browns team that can go to Kansas City, which is where they're heading, and make it an interesting football game because of their ability to run the football. I think that game could be very, very interesting, to say the least. So, with that said, we're going to get to our final segment of the day. Before we do that, I do want to encourage you guys to subscribe to the Louie T Network for more great content. Turn on that notification bell if you haven't already done so you don't miss a thing here on the Louie T Network. And also, hit that like button. 41 likes, 100 of you in the chat. I'd love to get that thing up to 50, possibly 60 if at all possible. Really do appreciate you guys. With that said, let's talk about garbage time. And really, I wanted to kind of highlight all of the movement with the coaching situation right now in the NFL. I talked about, the coaching carousel and Black Monday, and I told you we were going to stay abreast of that situation as moves happened. I was going to continue to update them here on the Louie T Network podcast, so I'm going to take the time to do that right now. Doug Peterson fired in Philadelphia yesterday. That was the biggest news on Monday. And I told you when we looked at those 6 vacancies for the head coaches and the 7 vacancies for the GMs, I said, we're not done yet. I wouldn't be shocked if there's one more vacancy. I thought it would actually end up being like Zach Taylor or somebody like that. But I told you, we've seen this in the past where you wait till the season has an opportunity to kind of settle down And, you never know. Owner could be out on vacation, and so he hadn't had a chance to come and talk to the coach. But we've seen this before where a coach has their philosophy on how they want to do things moving forward. The ownership wants other things done. And if they can't come to some kind of middle ground, then both parties agree mutually to just part ways. And that's essentially what happened in Philadelphia. There's a rumor out there that Doug Peterson wanted to leave after last year being forced to move on from offensive coordinator Al Groh, who he didn't want to fire. And a lot of times we talked about the NFL being a boys club and how guys get hired, to head coaching jobs, and then they hire a bunch of their buddies. Nobody wants to go in to an office and fire one of their buddies and tell them you can't stay, you got to go. Nobody wants to do that, and they get it. It's business. They understand that. But at the same time, I hired you here and we built this together. And if we're going down, we're all going down together on the same sinking ship. We're not going to have you get off the ship because we are terming you as dead weight and we want to lighten some of the load here. These guys, they come in together. They hire these guys. They don't want to fire these guys. And so if there's any kind of loyalty there and you're forcing me to kind of break that bond, there's a problem. And so Doug Peterson looked at the situation in Philadelphia. We know that their defensive coordinator is retiring, Jim Schwartz. So he's going to have to replace him. Offensive coordinator wise, he was looking to promote from within. Same thing with the defensive coordinator position. And Eagles management, they weren't feeling that. That wasn't enough for them. They're like, no. If we're going to fix this thing and you're going to stay here as head coach, we need some outside influences. We need some new blood in here. We don't trust your guys because they think the same way you do, and we're not comfortable with that. So if you're going to try to promote from within, you're going to have to leave. And he's like, look, that's what my plan is. If that's not good enough for you, then I'm out. Okay, peace. Deuce. So they decided to part ways. He'll get another job. The man just won a Super Bowl 3 years ago. I'm not the biggest Doug Peterson fan in the world. You know that. I think he's too aggressive with his analytics-based mentality. But it doesn't change the fact that the man won a Super Bowl. That's hard to do in this league. So, there were rumors that he'd be a big candidate for the Jets job because of his connection to their GM, Joe Douglas. Remember, he came from Philadelphia. So when they won the Super Bowl together in 2017. So there was a correlation there. They're going to try to connect all the dots. We'll see what happens with Doug Peterson. And if he does get one of these 6, now 7 NFL head coaching vacancies. But I think someone had asked me last week, do I think one of these coaches that got fired would now be hired? Here's the guy that moves to the top of that list. Doug Peterson, to me, is a guy that I just don't see him sitting out a year to get back in. I think he could ultimately get hired here shortly with one of these 7 vacancies. Tabasco Nolan, defensive coordinator of the Dallas Cowboys, former defensive coordinator of the Dallas Cowboys, was fired, along with defensive line coach Jim Tomsula over the weekend. And they have now found his replacement in Dallas, in ex-Falcons head coach Dan Quinn. I love the hire for Dallas. I hate the hire as a Washington fan because players love him wherever he goes, and he does a really good job of scheming up defenses and getting the most out of them. And they've got talent on that defensive side of the football for Dallas. Despite what you may have seen on the field from a production standpoint, a lot of that was coaching. They got talent on that side of the football, and I think you're going to start to see that with Dan Quinn now in as the defensive coordinator in Big D. Speaking of defensive coordinators, Gus Bradley, the brand new defensive coordinator of the Las Vegas Raiders, he is going to take over for the Raiders after they fired their defensive coordinator during the season. I want to say right around like week 13 or so. They went ahead and moved on from Paul Gunther, the ex-Cincinnati Bengals defensive coordinator that Gruden had brought on board. They weren't satisfied with what they were getting out of the defense. They moved on from Gunther, and now they are going to give ex-Jaguars head coach Gus Bradley a sniff in Vegas. So that's interesting. Robert Saleh seems to be closing in on the Jets gig, and looks to be the first guy to be hired in this head coaching musical chairs carousel. nothing's done yet, but anytime a guy is flying out for a second round of interviews, it's usually trending in that direction. We'll see if anything imminent comes of that situation, but Robert Saleh, defensive coordinator of the San Francisco 49ers, going back to New York for a second interview, and we'll see if anything comes of it. I don't think he's going to be the defensive coordinator of the San Francisco 49ers next year. He's getting a job, whether it's in New York with this Jets football team or in Detroit or in Atlanta. He's going to land somewhere. We'll see if that is in fact in New York with the Jets. Urban Meyer, my man Herb, still mulling over the decision whether to take the job in Jacksonville as the head man or not. The Jaguars reportedly are putting the full court press on Urban Meyer, offering up a lot of goodies. They've got a ton of cap space. They've got the number 1 pick in the draft. You're going to get Trevor Lawrence. It's very enticing. They've got talent on the roster already. I told you I was a big fan of their GM, David Caldwell. The biggest mistake he made was drafting Blake Bortles. That's what got him fired ultimately. But in terms of the roster and the talent that exists there already, I thought he did a phenomenal job of stockpiling that team with talented football players. And so when you look at what they have, the cupboard is not bare. There is talent in Jacksonville. And I think with all the draft capital that they have and all of the opportunity that they have for growth, it's a hard job to turn down. I don't want to see Urban Meyer on a sideline. College, NFL, it doesn't matter. I told you his health concerns concern me, okay? This is a guy that looks like he's about to have a heart attack when a game is a 2-point game and his field goal kicker is trotting onto the field. He looks like he's about to die. I don't want to see this guy hunched over on someone's sidelines because his heart is hurting because of the pressure that comes in NFL games. I just don't want to see it. So we'll see what happens. I hope he doesn't take the job. I think he's kind of mulling over the health concerns and all that would be thrusted upon him if he were to take this job. But it's a hard job to turn down right now with all of the goodies that's being offered up to you if you're Urban Meyer. And I think he's going to get a ton of money. I could see Herb commanding. You remember the report was out there that he wanted 12 a year. It may not be 12, but it could be 10. That's a lot of damn money for a guy that's never coached at the NFL level. So we'll see what happens there. The Houston situation with Deshaun Watson is really becoming toxic. Like I told you, these things sometimes can evolve rather quickly, and it seems like it's trending in that direction with Deshaun Watson all of a sudden. Like, we had heard nothing from the Watson camp on this situation. You know, it was all speculation. It was all rumor. And then Watson's camp kind of comes out and says, yeah, no, he's not happy. And as a matter of fact, he wouldn't mind a trade to Miami. Because I told you, he has a no trade clause, so he can determine where he goes. Like, they can't just say, hey, you know, we want to trade you to Washington. No, I don't want to go there. Try again. You know, oh, we'll trade you to Chicago. Nah, not really. Don't think I want to go to Chicago. Try again. You know, he has the veto power to do that because he has a no trade clause. So, you know, the first time we hear of him kind of throwing out, you know, a pseudo trade, and you know, who knows what is to happen, you know, but his camp, if his camp did this, they throw out the scenario of, hey, trade us to Miami. You can get Tua back in return. And maybe you got to throw some extra stuff in there to make it work. Whatever you got to do, sweeten the pot, make it happen. But, yeah, you know, you get Tua on a rookie deal. They get me. And everybody's happy. Interesting. If I'm the Texans, I want Tua and I want my damn first round pick back. I want my first round pick back. I don't know if it's going to happen. They're trying to mend fences. This isn't just about the GM situation and them hiring Nick Caserio and not even entertaining anything that Deshaun has had to say in this process. It goes deeper than that. You know, it's the culture that's been said. It's the, you know, inmates running the asylum comment. It's the lack of social injustice awareness in Houston. It's a lot of things. It's the moves that they've made. It's the lack of communication. It all speaks to a culture right now that's toxic in Houston. And Deshaun, I told you, he loves it in Houston. I think he wants to be in Houston, but he doesn't want to be a part of an organization that he thinks is starting to crumble. He wants to get out before it gets to that point. We'll see what happens. They're doing the right thing here. I told you the best thing they can do is communicate with Watson. Watson apparently is on vacation, as football players often do after the season's done. They go on vacation. They need to get away, rest their bodies, mentally get away, and recharge the battery. And that's what Watson apparently is doing right now. And once he comes back, I think that's when you have to get in contact with him immediately. And you have to set up a meeting with ownership, Cal McNair, new GM, Nick Caserio, and Deshaun Watson. And you all get in one room and you have a powwow. They're taking the right step here. They were the only coaching vacancy that wasn't taking the time to interview Chiefs offensive coordinator Eric Bieniemy, which is a favorite of Deshaun Watson, the guy that he wants them to sign and hire. They hadn't talked to him. They had no interest in talking to him. Now all of a sudden they do. That's a step in the right direction. And if you really want Deshaun to stay, you just hire him. But you don't want to hire a guy just because the quarterback wants him. You want to hire the guy because you interviewed him and he knocked your socks off. And it would make it that much sweeter that the quarterback wants him. But at least interviewing him is a sign of good faith if you're the Texans. It's a step in the right direction. Don't know what it's going to lead to, but that situation is worth monitoring because it doesn't seem like Watson is really thrilled with the prospects of going back to Houston at this moment. Things could change. It's a fluid situation, but I've also heard the rumor that he's very comfortable with the idea of sitting out 2021 if need be to foster change, meaning to facilitate a trade. So that situation is getting pretty interesting, to say the least, in Houston. And then finally, GM John Schneider of the Seattle Seahawks reaches an extension with the Seahawks to remain with the club. His contract was going to be up after after the season. And remember, there were a bunch of teams that reportedly were going to throw full autonomy his way, give him total control over the organization to lure him away from Seattle. And the Seahawks say, this is our guy. You can't have him. And we're going to make sure that we lock him up. And they did. So John Schneider remaining the general manager of the Seattle Seahawks. And he's done a phenomenal job. Outside of the first round, he's done a phenomenal job in Seattle over the last decade. It feels like plus. So that's going to do it essentially for the Louie T Network podcast. I thank you guys for joining me on the show. We'll be back on Thursday to preview the divisional round. 4 matchups, 2 on Saturday, 2 on Sunday. Should be a ton of fun. Any other news that comes down the pipeline, we will cover here on the Louie T Network podcast. So I look forward to joining you guys for that. Once again, if you haven't already done so, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Become a member of the Louie T Network podcast and Louie T Network as a whole. You don't want to miss anything. We're about to dive into the draft. You don't believe me? Here's my draft book right here, guys. You see how thick this thing is? We're going to work over here. All right, I told you I was getting in the lab, and I've already started the process. So we're going to go ahead and turn this thing on up. I mean, seriously, no, go ahead. Turn it up. So just know that draft season is about to be upon us. We're going to continue to put the bow on this NFL campaign, but draft season is pretty much here. So if you haven't already subscribed, go ahead and do that. While you're at it, hit that notification bell so you don't miss a thing. And then also, please hit that like button. I implore you to hit the like button earlier, and you didn't. So I'm going to ask you one more time nicely, and you can do whatever you like. You know, I don't have any power over you hitting the like button or not. Maybe you don't even like the video. It is what it is. If you could, please hit the like button. Anyway, I digress. I'm going to go ahead and glide to the side, allow you guys to enjoy the rest of your evening. I look forward to chopping it up with you guys on Thursday. For all of us over here at the Louie T Network, which means me, I will see you guys later. Thank you guys for joining me. Look forward to seeing you on Thursday afternoon. Until then, you guys take care, stay safe, and I'll see you on the next installment of the Louie T Network podcast. Until then, peace.